We have a number of issues that we're very interested to explore at the conference. The first being NATO itself. Clearly the United Kingdom, with troops in the south of Afghanistan, want to ensure that NATO is having a coherent view and that we're ensuring that some of the problems relating to the command structure and other issues are sorted out so that we can deal effectively with what is one of the most difficult problems that NATO faces. And the second NATO issue relates to the current Lisbon Treaty. We want to ensure that the arrangements being made for European security policy do not in any way duplicate or undermine what is happening in NATO, because NATO has been the bedrock, has been the anchor, as Frau Merkel said, about the security that we have in Europe, and we mustn't allow that to be undermined by any other political grouping. The second issue is really where Russia is going at the present time, and we look forward to what Mr. Ivanov says tomorrow, following on the speech of President Putin yesterday when he talked about a new arms race. That, I think, made a lot of us feel anxious. We'll want to get some answers to those questions. And finally, we have to understand that in the battle against Islamic extremism, we're in a war of ideology here, and that will be a long war of ideology. We have to stand very resolutely for the values that we have in our respective countries. We have to realise that it's going to require consistency and courage and patience to win this war in the long term. Just as we set about dealing with the Soviet Union and its ideology in the Cold War, so we have to have the same patience and understanding of the weaknesses of our opponents and the strengths of our own values if we're to win the long war against Islamic extremism.
Sir, you might become the next Defence Minister of UK. What would be your changes if you take over this very difficult and honourable task?
Well, first of all, I make no presumptions about elections. I think that's always unwise for politicians, although the Conservative Party is doing well at the moment in the United Kingdom. I think it's not so much change as to take the good parts that are working well at the moment and to continue with those, but to look at the elements, for example, of NATO, which are not working so well, to try to improve them. And as I've mentioned, some of those are the mechanics of what's happening in Afghanistan. And also, we have some very strong reservations about the way that EU policy is developing, particularly under the Lisbon Treaty. We actually view that as potentially undermining or duplicating NATO in a way which is actually unhelpful for our collective security. But that, I imagine, is a debate we will have long before we get to an election in the United States.